All right, good morning. Am I on? All right. Good morning. I'm going to start off with a bit of a disclaimer. There were some technical difficulties when I brought my slides over. The file was apparently a little bit corrupted. I think it's all there, but just the transitions are lost. So you're going to be seeing some of the information a little before I intended. But I think it's all there. We'll cross our fingers and hope. Okay, so we started last week talking about songs that we sing, specifically, songs that we sing in worship. And we talked a little bit, we gave a history, a background of where singing was mentioned from very early in the Bible to very late in the Bible. We're going to continue that. This week, I'm going to geek out a little bit on you here. When I've taught in the past, I've mentioned that I am, by education, a scientist. So these types of things fascinate me, so we're going to work a little bit of that into this one as well. Note the disclaimer, this is not a rigorous discussion of sound or singing. This is Jim's thoughts on how things fit together. So there's very possibly some oversimplification or some less than careful choice of words here. But the idea is just to get the big picture. So I think it will go okay. And then there's definitely one area that I am totally skipping, and I will mention that. So, once again, you get it all at once on the slide. To me, singing is made up of music and words. You know, actually, I think there was a movie a few years ago about that. But you have words. You communicate with words. But when you have singing, you are combining that with a melody and with, in some cases, harmony. And it begins to get more and more complex. So both of these aspects of singing are made up of sounds. And they are organized sounds. They're not noise, they're not random. So we're going to talk a little bit about sound this morning. And just see what's involved, what has to happen for us to have singing. As I said, not going to be a rigorous discussion. When a noise is made, if I snap my fingers, clap my hands, if I speak for that matter, the mechanical movement of something is causing pressurized waves in the air. So all those air molecules bouncing around happen to get compressed a little bit tighter, and those waves spread out. So the simplest way I can think of to look at it is imagine you throw a rock into a pond, and you see those waves spreading out in all directions. It's not perfect, like right now I'm facing this way, so the waves are going to go in that direction more than they're going to go behind me. But if you don't have something directing the waves in a certain direction, they spread out. Now, if you are swimming in that pond and you get your eyes down right on the level of the surface, you can see the crests and the troughs in that wave. You have to look quick because it's going by quickly. And for sound waves, those waves in the air, it's very quick. You're looking, milliseconds or something. So this is not a perfect analogy, but we'll go with it. Now, unfortunately, my transition was supposed to show that a wave will have a height, what's called the amplitude, and it will have a wavelength. So the height tells you how loud a sound is. If you happen to see, and we'll see a few pictures later a diagram of a sound wave. If you put everything on the same scale, the higher the sound wave, the louder the sound. And in the same way, that distance between the crest and the wave gives you an indication of how high or low that sound is, whether it is a very low sound like a tuba, a very high sound like a bird whistle, for example. So here are a few pictures. Hard to see. I don't like the colors. And I just told you that the height has to do with how loud it is. Well, these measurements were taken at different times and they were scaled differently. But I wanted to point this out for a few reasons. First of all, the one on the left says bass, and that bass is misspelled. Says bass voice singing. I actually think I have a little bit of doubts about this because it's too regular. But bass voice singing, those peaks are spread out. So as I said, the farther apart it's spread, the lower the pitch. So a bass singer would have the peaks spread out with a longer wavelength. If you look at the trumpet, a trumpet is generally considered a high-pitched instrument. So again, kind of hard to see, but you can see that all those peaks and valleys are very close together. So very short wavelength, a high-pitched sound. This one gets even more complicated because if you were to look more closely at it, I should have blown it up, you would see that there are different sets of waves that are all superimposed on each other. Musical instruments, and voices for that matter, can set up what's called overtones. So you might have a particular pitch, but because of the way the air bounces around in your mouth and your throat or in the horn of the trumpet, or if you have a stringed instrument, the way that string vibrates back and forth, they have what's called overtones. So you can have that one primary frequency and you can have other frequencies, and we'll look at that on the next slide. But just pointing out, it is very complex. If everything was this perfect wave up and down, the music sounds really horrible. Think of the simplest little computer sound that, a child might do on some beginning programming exercise. Just a simple sine wave would be the classic thing, and it sounds horrible. The quality to that music is not pleasing at all. So when you start making these complicated overtone series, it becomes more pleasant to listen to. And then third, I put up there a drum. And by the way, on all of these, this is over time, because we were talking about that wave propagating out. From the left side to the right side of each of those is milliseconds. It's very quick. The drum has a pretty constant spacing between the peaks, but you can see the amplitude goes up and down. The volume goes up and down. So as you hit that drum, the top of that drum is vibrating and it pulses, so it gets loud and soft and loud and soft. But it's all happening on milliseconds. And those are the things that give this the characteristic of a drum. If it had a different shape of wave there, it wouldn't sound like that drum. It might sound like another drum, or it might sound like something that's not a drum at all. Now, if we take these plots, and I was pointing out the spacing there tells you the pitch. If you take that trumpet plot there and say, well, I've got a bunch of pitches with this spacing, and I've got a bunch of waves with a different spacing, and a bunch of waves with another spacing, then imagine the upper left picture here. So in the pink, you see that primary pitch. But then you see, this is for a flute. The website I was using for diagrams didn't carry the same instruments through the entire discussion. But here you can see it's got that 436. It's that first pink peak there. That's their primary pitch. Well, a flute has lots of those overtones in it, and they're normally at multiples of that frequency. So 436, and then double that, you get 872. And the primary and the first overtone, in this case, are pretty comparable in intensity. And then the third one is lower. The fourth one is even lower. That gives it its flute quality. The recorder spectrum on the right is different. It has a very strong primary, the first overtone, very tiny. You almost don't see it. The third and fourth ones are there, but they're not very strong. And once again, that helps make it sound like a recorder and not a flute. Third, it says female voice. This is another one that is very regular. And the author of this website even pointed out that they used it because the spacing was so regular. So don't necessarily figure that that is going to be what you see all the time, but it does illustrate the fact that, there are overtones in this woman's voice, and they are multiples of the primary. And interestingly enough, they're fairly closely spaced. If you go from one person to another, the frequencies are going to shift around, the relative intensities of all those overtones are going to shift, and that's what makes one person sound like them. That's why you can recognize their voice as opposed to sounding like someone else. And then just to put everything in perspective, the lower right-hand picture there, white noise. For those of us who are old enough to have had an analog radio, when you dial across or when you move across the dial and you get off of a station and you just get that constant noise, probably not quite white noise, but that's the idea. It's not at discrete pitches. It's got everything across the sound spectrum. May not be completely level in terms of intensities. That's part of what defines white noise, is they're all the same. So you might have some peaks and valleys, but they're going to be broad, they're going to be distributions, and they're not going to have those nice musical qualities that you would see in something like a musical instrument or a voice. Don't have a slide for this, but I'll also mention, we've got a couple of wind instruments listed there, and what produces those pulsing vibrations of air molecules is the air moving inside the horn. So that's very easy to understand. You can go to a string instrument. A lot of people will be familiar with a guitar, for example. The length of the string, the diameter of the string, how tight you've got it stretched, all determine how fast that string vibrates. So that and how fast it vibrates tells you the pitch. Once again, those properties of the string also tell you where the overtones are. So. And those overtones get transmitted to the body of the guitar, and it's projected. It makes an acoustic guitar sound different from an electric guitar, sound different from a banjo, and different from a ukulele. Well, you can take all of that and bring it back to your vocal cords. Your vocal cords are similar in that, it's unconscious, but in our throats, as we talk, we are changing the tension on those vocal cords. We are tightening them or loosening them to raise the pitch or to lower it. Most of the time we do it without even thinking what pitch is going to come out. And once again, everybody has a characteristic sound, and that natural tension that they have and the shape of the inside of their throat and the inside of their mouth determines what their voice sounds like. And subtle changes make a large difference. While I'm talking, I'm changing the shape of my mouth. I'm changing how I'm forcing the air out, and lo and behold, you're hearing different words. You can hear the inflection. You know, if I ask a question and my voice goes up, or I just make a statement and the voice stays level or goes down. So all these things work together, and I'm jumping ahead on the speaking part. But just to illustrate that our bodies have these same things that take place in terms of making the vibrations. Go ahead, Matt.
Really fascinating for me. But when I was on the submarine, when we're submerged, we can't see anything. And so we navigate all over the world by listening to sound.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're describing is, lots of people are trained, and we have fine-tuned instruments, hydrophones, to detect all these concepts and listen point. Because not just like people or flutes or instruments, everything makes noise and usually has some kind of primary tonal and characteristics. So for instance, with the frequency, we can track other submarines by the equipment that they're running on, by the frequency by which the electrical frequency occurs that causes a different alternating or alternating current pitch or tone for that particular motor or that particular shaft that's rotating, basically propulsion. And so we look for all that through all that white noise, and we'll filter out the white noise and find these specific frequencies or tones to track or just to navigate.
Yeah, that's excellent. For someone who might not have heard, Matt's talking about being on a submarine. You know, on a submarine, everybody thinks of sonar, but it's far more than that. You know, he's saying that they can track other submarines by the sounds of them. You know, like we recognize a voice. I'm sure when the people that are trained hear a particular sound, they know which sub it is. So yeah, that's perfect illustration of just how complex this all is. So to get into a little bit more of the musical side of it, yeah, I like music. I'm a bit of a music theory geek, so I'm going to touch on just a little bit of that as well, and I've got a reason for it. So going back to a common object many people will have experience with, piano keyboard. Whether you're an accomplished musician or not, chances are you've gone up to a piano at some point and just plunk, plunk, plunk on the keys. And you know that as you go from left to right, the sound goes from low to high. So on the low end, you've got longer strings or maybe thicker strings. They vibrate at a lower sound. On the higher end, you've got either tighter tension or smaller strings, much like a guitar. But there's a pattern to those keys. And you may not know what that pattern is if you're not a piano player. But Western music, and I'm just talking about Western music. If you get into Eastern music, it's way more complicated than even this. Western music has a repeating pattern in how those wavelengths fit together. So looking at the illustration here on the left of the keyboard, when that keyboard is starting on a C note, this diagram is, and when you get up to where it repeats, when you get up to the next C, you know that frequency has doubled. It goes back to those, you know, when we looked at the overtone series in the voices or the trumpets, and you saw you had your primary and your first overtone and your second. When you get up to the repeating note, the primary is now doubled. So all of these things depend on the math and the physics behind how, you know, if you strike a chord on that piano or your whatever musical instrument you're playing, all those waves come and hit your ear at the same time. So when you have a couple of notes that sound pleasing together, they're going to have a simple, nice, elegant relationship in those frequencies. If you have notes that really clash, and there are some that really clash, a lot of, if you just hit multiple notes at once, part of that noise or unpleasantness is because you've got a lot of different things, coming at you at once. But part of it is because you've got notes that don't have a good mathematical relationship behind them, that are getting hit. You're getting hit with those sounds at the same time. So once again, when you start looking at the science behind just how a simple musical one or two notes on an instrument come together, it's pretty complicated. Same thing happens when we sing. Actually, this is a good time to move forward. Coming back to that first slide with a little bit of addition here. So our music, it's not just noise. All those sound waves are organized in a certain way. So you have pitch, you have timbre, which is the kind of the hard to describe qualities. Again, whether it's one person or another, whether it's a male voice or a female voice, and whether it's Betty or Joan, you can tell the difference from just the natural timbre and pitch qualities that a person has. So that's music. But then you have to superimpose it with words. And if there is a speech therapist in here, I am very, very sorry for this statement. This is, again, this is where I'm skipping a bunch. All this stuff we've been talking about with our vocal cords have to vibrate to make sound, and they vibrate at a certain, frequency, and that gives an individual person their recognizable sound. You're going to get vowels out of that. That's the ah. Then our bodies, as we are, and our brains, as we're so tall, start learning how to talk. And we put in between all those, nice vowel sounds that our vocal cords are producing, we put in all these other, stops and, I don't even know what to call it. The T's and the S's. Our vocal cords don't necessarily participate in every sound we make. So all of that working together makes a person's voice, and it allows them to communicate words. And Matt had a lesson a few weeks ago where he was talking about hearing and sound and the complexity of the human ear. So I think back to that, and what I come away with all of this is God's design is just so incredibly complex. It is amazing to me that all this works together. God created us in such a way that, just going to the words, our brains can communicate and understand and comprehend. Our ears are complex enough that they can, take all those sound waves and decipher them into something that is intelligible. Our mouths and our vocal cords can produce those sounds. Our brains can tell us how to do that subconsciously. I don't have to, I can, but I don't have to say, okay, for this word, I'm going to close my lips down and purse them. Or for that word, I'm going to start by putting my tongue behind my teeth. Our brains do it all subconsciously, and God created us this way. When it gets down to all the music theory and how the waves combine, God created that too. God created physics. It was His design. He could have done it another way. He could have designed us so that we had no hearing. So we are made in a very complex way, and it all fits together by God's design. Math, physics, biology, it's all God's creation. So when I listen to someone singing, for example. There's so much that goes into it, and God created us so that we can understand it. God created it so that it can move our feelings. Didn't talk about how some of those musical notes fit together. Some musical notes fit together, and the feeling that it evokes is happiness, it's a brightness, it's a positive. Other notes fit together, and it makes us sad. It gives it gives us an entirely different feel. And this is, once again, it's all God's creation. So I look at this and it's almost I can't come up with the right word. I say, well, I appreciate it. You don't appreciate God. He's magnificent. He's the creator. But it's just so amazing that he created us in the way he did. Okay, so going to look a little bit today at Deuteronomy 6. Man, I'm lecturing a lot. Prefer when it works a different way, but that's the way it goes today. When we get into this, feel free to make comments. Working through this morning's technical difficulties. So in Deuteronomy, Moses is speaking to the Israelites. And there are, I think it's 3 speeches that he makes in Deuteronomy. And this is the record of them. Excuse me. In Deuteronomy 6, he's speaking to Israel, and this is a famous passage. He says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." The first word the first word is here, H-E-A-R. In Hebrew, that would be more Shema, as at least according to what I read. I'm not knowledgeable in Hebrew. But this section is very famous among practicing Jews. They recite this as a prayer. And apparently have done it for thousands of years. So if you look at this, what an incredible message. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Look at some of the context of it before and after it. Moses says, God commanded me to teach you that you might do them. So listen what I'm telling you. And why? So that your son and your grandson might fear the Lord your God to keep all his statutes. You should listen and be careful to do it. Are you hearing a theme here? That you might do them, that you would keep his statutes. You should listen and be careful to do it. Then after these verses, he tells them, the words I'm going to tell you, these words shall be where? On your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons and shall talk of them when you sit in your house. So let's look at the word, Shema. Most of the time, it's at least here, we're thinking it's translated here. Some Bible translations might say listen. And certainly that is a valid translation. But it carries more than that in meaning. In Hebrew, the culture was different, and hearing had an emphasis not just on this mental thing. Well, I heard it, I comprehended the words you said, but, it does something to you. So it implies an action. For Moses to say, hear this, he's saying, listen to what I'm saying and do them. And he turned around and he said that. And it just so happens, I learned something in preparing for this. The same word Shema, many times in our English translations, is translated obey. So there's that dual meaning when he says, hear Israel. And then the passage itself, we'll mention a little bit here, is quoted in the New Testament. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. A little bit different phrase in Revelation, he who has an ear, let him hear. Well, where did he tell the Hebrews to put the words? He said, put them on your heart. Not just in your head, put them on your heart. And then what do you do with them? They're on your heart. What do you do with them? You teach them. Here's where we can really learn about this. What do we do with our children? The words that we get from God, His teachings, the Bible, we should be teaching them diligently, not haphazardly, but diligently to our children. And these words, he said, talk of them when you sit, when you walk, when you lie down, when you rise up. I get somebody to talk. What's he saying when he gives these 4 times? All the time, that's right. It's not say, well, I sat down, I have to teach my son something. Or, well, I'm walking across the room, I have to teach. No, it's all the time. Our daily lives, as we go about living our family life, we should be living out these things. We should take those teachings, put them in our heart, and then exemplify them to our children. We should be teaching them, talking to them about them. He also says, bind them. Some practicing Jews take this literally, and they put written words, and they put them on their forehead or on their arm. But that's, for us, we can take that. Those should go with us everywhere. They're in our hearts. I think we're moving along. Actually, might finish a couple minutes early. To continue this section on the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. So he said, hear these words I'm going to tell you. And what's the next thing out of his mouth? The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. This is New American Standard. There was a neat little discussion about the Hebrew and how it's translated, and I couldn't go into that. You need a Hebrew scholar. But it turns out that there's a little bit of vagueness in how people translate this. They said, the article I was reading said that there is no present tense in Hebrew, that they just put the words next to each other. So it's the Lord our God, the Lord one, something like that. So there might be a little bit different shading in how it's translated depending on where you put the is. But the message comes out the same. And I see 2 messages here. First of all, the Lord is one. We don't have time for a lesson on the Trinity, but the Lord is one. God and the Spirit and the Son are all together. They are one. But I think more importantly in this context, Moses speaking to the Israelites is the meaning that God, the Lord is our one God. If you look at the history, they had come out of Egypt who had many gods. They were going into Canaan, which, if you go back and read all of this passage, there's discussion of, you didn't earn this land. You didn't build these cities. You didn't plant these fields. I'm giving it to you. So there's that whole lesson that we're skipping. But they're going into this land of Canaan, and the people that are there also have many false gods. And he tells them in verses 14 and 15, you shall not follow other gods, any of the gods of the people who surround you. For the Lord your God in the midst of you is a jealous God. Another lesson for us. How many times do we put things ahead of God? And I'm not going to make any accusations, plead guilty as much as the next person. We have so much opportunity, priorities, where we put things ahead of God. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's not. But here, Moses is telling people, don't you follow these other gods. You're going to have opportunity to worship something besides our Father. and don't do it. Then if we move forward into the New Testament, it's quoted a couple of times, Mark 12, Matthew 22. One of the scribes came and heard them arguing. This is where Jesus was being essentially interrogated because they were trying to catch him in some sort of, teaching error. And the scribe says, what commandment is the foremost of all? And Jesus answered, what did he say? The foremost is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. In, I believe it's the Matthew passage, actually in both of them, he goes on and says, and the second most important commandment is to love your neighbor. And then in Matthew, he says, on these two commandments, all the law and the prophets hang. So Jesus himself is saying that, worshiping God, our one God, and loving him is our greatest commandment. Oh, we've got a couple of minutes. Any comments? You look like you're going to say something. Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
Fighting words, always having our heart. I think when Heather was teaching, the thing she did that her kids learned was just put everything in a song, right? Because that helps you remember it and it stays on your heart.
Yeah. So Justin was mentioning, teaching kids, you put things in a song like the alphabet. I had a lot of comments last week with people talking about those mental connections. Singer Glenn Campbell, who's no longer with us, had some sort of dementia, Alzheimer's or something. There are video clips of him as his disease progressed. He could still sing. So that musical connection stayed with him. I appreciate Ed for pointing that out last week. There's just something about music. And once again, it's the way God made us. Music does something to us, and it stays in our head. I have no doubt, I don't know what it sounded like, but would not be surprised if, eventually we find out that in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were humming, singing something, because it just seems to be such a natural part of us.
The Hebrew lifestyle was music. Psalms 101 says, David says, I will think about the steadfast love and justice of the Lord, and I will make music. I will play a melody. He says in Psalms 150, praise the Lord with a loud harp and a tambourine and a dance. And just in praise, not worship, just in praise, that daily thing with just thinking about God and singing and music and putting music all together, the celebration of God and the celebration of love. And they wanted to express it with the music, especially David and the musicians. They expressed their praise with music. And even God himself says in Ezekiel 26, he says to Tyre, when he's talking about, I will take all these things away from Tyre, I'm going to stop your music. And when you think about stopping music, all that joy and all that love and all that, ooh, it's fun, that's gone. He says, I'm going to take your horses, I'm going to destroy this, I'm going to destroy that, but I'm also going to stop your music. And for Hebrews to read that, and for the children of Israel to read it and say, oh man, no music? God's going to take your music away? That's like, I'm going to take your joy away. Because when we, like you said, when we hear music, it reminds us of a time. I have our wedding song. I remember that when that song plays, I remember, oh man, that was the time when I was trying to dance and it didn't work out too well. That's what David was trying to push out to the children of Israel that love and the steadfast love of God. We're going to praise him with music. And yes, we're going to worship him with music, but we need to praise him with music and praise him for when we just think about how good he is to us in his justice.
Yeah. Okay, so that's way too much for me to recap, but excellent. Yeah, David talked about how he would praise God when he played music. And I didn't know about you said Ezekiel?
Yeah, Ezekiel 26.
Okay, one to look up, where, God said that he was going to take the music away from them. So there's reaching down into almost your core, into how you work. We're going to take it away from you. You had a comment earlier.
Point. Music is such an energizing effect on you if you walk. And plus, if you sing spiritual songs and you're walking to spiritual music, it's amazing how it energizes your body into action. The rhythm, the whole idea of singing melody just changes my whole ability to walk faster and in harmony with my feet. That's just one of the amazing aspects of music to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great comment about walking with music. It gets your brain going, it gives you energy. Psychologically, you're able to perform more. How many times do you see ads for, headphones that are designed for people who run, or fitness watches that you can put your music on them, so you don't have to carry your phone, and then your headphones can link to it, and you can listen to that music while you're running. Music, once again, it just connects with you so deep that physically, you can do more. That music it gives you that mental energy that translates into the physical. Okay. So if my clicker can keep up with our singing, let's sing this one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one God, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all of thy heart, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all of thy soul, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all of thy strength. Thank you.